Dave, we're ready to start.
Okay, welcome everybody to another installment of our virtual county finance school. It's our 55th county finance school, and we're hoping that next year we'll be able to all meet in person again. So today's session is on cash management, and we have a NYSAC partner here today, 3+1, to talk about investing today. Especially the ARP funds that are going to be coming. There's a lot of cash going to be coming into counties over the next few weeks, probably. So we're going to spend this session today talking about cash management and liquidity performance. I just was talking to Bill before. We have two speakers today. We have Bill Cherry, who's the Director of Public Relations with 3+1, and Kyle Metcalf, who's a relationship analyst with 3+1 as well. And I'll provide some brief background on them, but we're just talking to Bill before the call, before we started the session, about interest earnings. And that was thank you to OSC, our state partner, state comptroller's office. I was looking at the local government database, and they break out interest and earnings as a category for counties. And in 1996, counties collected about 180 million in interest and earnings. And it hasn't changed much since then. It goes up and down a little bit. And considering the size of county budgets since then, it's really difficult to earn interest to benefit the taxpayer. And a lot of it has to do with the Great Recession and Federal Reserve actions. But there are opportunities to do better. And the state comptroller has been asking counties and all local governments to do a better job here because it does benefit the taxpayer at the end of the day. So I think Bill and Kyle are going to go back and forth a little bit on the presentation. But Bill, many of you on the phone or listening today know Bill, 38 years of local government service, the treasurer in Schoharie County for 24 years, was responsible for, I think, the biggest construction project in the history of Schoharie County after the flood, Hurricane Irene, rebuilding a lot of the government buildings and a lot of other projects. Bill is a past president of NYSAC. He was on the board of directors for 12 years, and was also president of the New York State County Treasurers and Finance Officers Association, and was recipient of County Treasurer of the Year in 2013. Congratulations, Bill, on that. A long, long work history in county government, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dave. What a great introduction. Thanks. And really, honestly, the high points of my years in public service were my time with NYSAC, with the great Steve Aquario and Mark Levine and you and Jeanette and Juanita and the whole team at NYSAC. It's amazing what you do for our member counties, and your experience and the knowledge that you bring to county officials, and what gets brought to county officials through finance school. I mean, just amazing. I never missed a finance school, I don't think, during those whole 24 years, and it's a great honor for me to be here today as a presenter instead of being an attendee and just learning from others. So thanks for allowing me to be here, Dave.
Thank you very much. Jeanette, do we have any housekeeping to go over to remind people of how to submit questions and things?
Yes, just a couple of very simple notes for everybody to keep in mind during the webinar. Number one, the program is being recorded, as we customarily do. A recording of this program, as well as a PDF of the slide deck, will be posted on the NYSAC website under the Education tab under Finance School, or under Webinars. It's in two places. One other important item, on your dashboard you will see a tab called Handouts. If you click on that, you will have the ability to download the Office of the State Comptroller's CPE credits form, which if you're pursuing CPEs, you definitely have to fill out. Just a little note, if you download this, you only have to download it once. For any workshop that you're going to be on for finance school, you can use one form. They have a list of all the workshops, and you can click multiples. But please do download that form. I will also post that on the website next to the recording and the PDF. Also, during the program, we ask that you submit all questions in writing. The way to do that is just to go to the Questions tab on your dashboard, click on it, it'll drop down and give you a space to type in your question and then just submit it. When we get to the Q&A portion of the program, we will go over all questions. That's it for housekeeping. Back to Dave.
Thank you, Jeanette. So I didn't have a chance to introduce Kyle, but I'll do that right now. Kyle is joined 3+1 in June of 2020, and prior to that, he was an investor relations director for the Hamister Group in Buffalo. In that role, he helped to facilitate new investments and further the growth of relationships. Of particular importance is Kyle's depth of experience in the RFP process and lends expertise to public and higher education entities utilizing 3+1's revolutionary RFP prep tool. So thank you, Kyle and Bill, and I will turn the program over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave, and thank you everybody for joining in on today's webinar about cash management. And we're also going to talk about liquidity management and the ARP program regarding the cash aspect and the strategic management of it. And then we're going to talk about some investment options that NYSAC is advocating for. So federal resources, as you'll see on the slide there, do need to be strategically managed and prudently invested over the next several years. This goes not only for your, that rule makes sense for your existing municipal funds as well, because every dollar that you can earn in interest is $1 less that you need to collect in taxes. So strategically managing and prudently investing funds just flat out makes sense. It's probably a core principle in your written investment policy for your county. And as a part of that, our as Dave mentioned, our colleagues and partners at the Office of the State Comptroller, tip of the hat to Tom DiNapoli and his great staff for the help they provide to county governments and municipalities everywhere, and also to NYSAC. OSC has been actively promoting strategic and effective cash management in focused audits, different than your normal state comptroller audits that are more wide-ranging and maybe look at several aspects of a county's or municipality's operating. These new audits are, I should say, newly introduced audits over the past year and a half, are geared strictly towards cash management and effectively managing your cash in order to maximize interest income. And then finally, towards the end of the program, we'll talk about the possibility, and we're hopeful of New York State expanding the investment options. I do want to acknowledge, you'll see the logos on this slide. I want to acknowledge the National Association of Counties, NACO. They are not only great partners with NYSAC, they're great partners with municipalities and counties all across the country. I had the honor of serving on the NACO board for a short time while I was the NYSAC president. Kyle Klein, Matt Chase is the executive director, Bill Jason, all great NACO officials that help bring not only the core principles of fiscal management to counties all across the country, but also our partners with 3+1. And we're not going to make today's webinar a sales pitch in any way for 3+1. we're proud of our relationship with NYSAC and NACO, but we're going to talk in general terms about cash management and how you can do that to benefit your municipality. So I guess we can go to the next slide, please, Jeanette. And learning objectives, remember you're eligible for CPE credits on this. Number one, general cash management and liquidity discussion. Kyle, you want to give a quick touch on number two? You and I will be going back and forth during today's webinar. How about number two?
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and good morning, everyone. You know, as Bill mentioned, you know, certainly going to touch on a lot of different topics today and surrounding cash management and how we can help maximize the liquidity and provide some tidbits of information that might, you know, further the counties. And so as far as, you know, general cash management liquidity discussion, also how interest earnings can be maximized, the overall value and impact of these new American Rescue Plan funds that are coming to hit bank accounts soon. We're not quite sure exactly when yet, but you know, certainly over the next couple of weeks. And then also, Bill's going to touch on a review of new investment options for New York State local governments as recommended by NYSAC. So I know that's a big effort that's being pushed forward. And so kind of review what options are out there and what's available to counties to really maximize that value and bring additional income and value to the counties, you know, without raising taxes. So I think a couple great topics for today's session and really looking forward to sharing with you all any of the information that we have on our behalf that can help you guys all.
Thanks, Kyle. And there's not a number 4 listed on this page, but I'll just touch base again. If I was going to include a number 4, it would have been a review of those cash management audits that are underway by OSC. And I would encourage you to check out the comptroller's website. Everybody listening to this webinar is familiar with the website, but if you go to the local government section and you go to the audits and you enter cash management, you'll find 12 or 14 different cash management audits that are really interesting. They're you know, they're not long. They're, I don't know, a page or two, and the findings and the recommendations are summarized in the first 1 or 2 pages. But essentially, they are recommending that municipalities identify exactly how much cash they have available, identify how long that cash can reasonably expected to remain on deposit, and then to search out the most advantageous interest rates, so that they can earn the maximum amount of money on that on those dollars. It's a safe, secure, and prudent way to generate additional income, which means, again, you won't need to raise that money from taxes. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but we don't have enough time to that would be a whole webinar in itself, just touching on the cash management audits by OSC. If we can go to the next slide, please, Jeanette. Okay, cash flow is not the same as liquidity. That is a hard thing to explain, but I've found that for me, the helpful tool was in one of my webinars, I identified, you know, waves on the top of the ocean and versus, you know, the depths of the ocean down below. When you're looking at the waves of the ocean, that's a lot like cash flow. It's up, it's down, it often takes sort of a regular sort of a cadence to it. But some waves are bigger than others. Some months you have more, a bigger wave of money going out than you have money coming in. But cash flow is what's on the surface. And, you know, when you're looking at the surface, you really can't tell much about what's below the surface. You really don't know how deep is the water, and all you know is what you're seeing on the surface. Liquidity is looking down into the deepest depths of your liquidity, and that means across multiple accounts and multiple funds. it presents an entirely different picture, as you can see from these two pictures. Once you know liquidity, then you can effectively manage that liquidity. But you have to identify it first. Kyle, anything to add on this one?
No, I think that's spot on, Bill. There's a lot right at the top that the ins and outs, and you can see that, and really some additional value oftentimes gets missed by not seeing what's down below the surface level. That everybody has a million things going on, and there's a lot of time, and sometimes not necessarily have that time to go deeper down into the bottom of where some other opportunities that we can find some additional value and really stretch the value of the cash.
Thanks, Kyle. And Jeanette, I think we can go to the next slide now. Regular analysis of liquidity can tell you how much cash you have across multiple bank accounts. That's really key. During my years as treasurer, I tried to keep, sort of an ongoing running balance, and as I'm sure all of you on this webinar do, but there are new tools. Honestly, the times have changed. FinTech has evolved, and technology now gives us the ability, instead of sort of looking at a series of spreadsheets or as I used to do it, I'm embarrassed to say, a little bit on the back of a napkin. How much have I got in general fund checking? What are those 2 or 3 CDs we have out there? But what about highway? And what about the machinery fund? Having a centralized focus, if you can do that, about where your cash is across multiple accounts and multiple banks, is how that liquidity picture comes into focus. Kyle, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think in addition, just a lot of the feedback that we've received, when we ask people what's the hardest part about your job, and it's sometimes it's going back and forth and not having access to information in a single place. And I ask everybody out there, do you have one location where you can go and see what do I have in all of my bank accounts that I'm responsible for, that I look after? Can I easily identify where there should be or could be some extra opportunity to take advantage of funds that maybe aren't providing any value? And certainly familiar with money that you may not have access to or can't touch or move, but is there a different way that you can use that money to provide the county value? Not necessarily always through interest earnings, but could it be bank savings? And I know we'll get into kind of banking structures in a little bit, but I challenge you all to ask yourself, can I go to a single location and see all of my bank accounts? And if not, is that something that would be helpful for you and something that you should look into? So I think that this is, really a great, having that analysis and taking a look at that, it could be very helpful to a lot of counties.
That's a great point, Kyle. And you touched on this a little bit. Compensating balances, we all know, and we'll get into this a little, as Kyle said, a little farther down the road. But compensating balances are what we use in municipalities to not have to pay hard fees. There are some counties, I have no doubt, that are choosing to pay hard fees because based upon their particular scenario, they can earn more on the compensating balances, having that liquidity available. It's cheaper to pay the fees. But the only way to know that is to know all of the ins and outs of all the different accounts. And you may have, if you're getting we'll call it, free banking services, you may have an account that can be applied towards that compensating balance that's different than, let's say, your general fund account, where maybe you can earn some income on that. So But you got to know how much you have first. We can go to the next slide, please, Jeanette. Taking advantage of positive cash flow. One of the things that happens is legislators may know of a event that's coming that is going to cost money, and you got to have funds available to do that. But finance offices will with enough information at hand can point out the revenues in and the expenditures out in any given month and show what the net is. For example, we'll use this top example. As county officials, we know the biggest positive cash flow February. This municipality's February of 2020. They got in $148 million. Of course, that's when property taxes revenues are at their highest. They also had negative cash flows of $92 million. They're paying bills, they're paying payroll. Some counties pay the retirement bill in February. The net monthly impact is the difference between those two. It's a positive for that month of February. They had $56 million, just over that, in positive net cash flow, so they could put that money to work. Now we don't, we're not advocating, trying to juggle cash, day to day, but knowing that the funds that are in your account, in this particular municipality's account in February, is going to remain in there. Yeah, they're gonna pay out $92 million in bills, but they're getting in more than they're paying out. So the balances in their bank accounts will not only remain stable, they'll actually increase. Let's go down to, for example, May of 2020. You'll see that negative cash flows 58, we'll call it 58.2 million, and positive of 57.2. Now, if you only look, pardon me, if you only look at the outflow, if you're a county board, for example, and you're thinking, oh gosh, we got $58 million going out the door this month, we're going to have to borrow money. We've got to figure out where we're going to get this money. No, you not only your normal carryover of operating funds is in place, but you also got $57.2 million coming in. So it's not all, when it comes to large complex organizations like municipality, it's not all one or all the other. It's not all outflow, it's not all revenue in. Each month is a balance of the two, but having access to this kind of data can help you identify the 3 months in this case, 3 months out of the year where you have positive cash flow: February, April, and September. You look down that column to the right, you'll see those three months all have a net positive cash flow. It's just more information to help the chief financial officer and the cash management staff of the finance office have one more piece of information. The more data you can have, the more information you have, the better your chances of maximizing the value of your liquidity. Anything to add to that one, Kyle?
No, and I think that right at the end, you nailed that. I think having the data, and oftentimes we hear, I have so much data, I don't want any more data. But I think simplifying the data, right, and making it, as complex as municipalities and everything can be, breaking it down to something, this simple. I have this much money coming in, I have this much money going out, and this is actual cash, right? We're looking at actual, credits and debits that are leaving the bank account and truly the liquidity. and simplifying it down and having data that's actionable, right? And I can look at this chart and know exactly, last year, how much money came in, how much money went out, and what did that do to my overall balances? And being able to take that and better plan and have a little bit more assurance when I go and make that decision, if I'm the financial officer of an entity, that I think that puts me in a better position and a leg up, right?
I agree. And that bottom word over there to the right, confidence. That's what it gives you. The more information you have, the more confidence you have. And Kyle, you said it really well. It doesn't do you any good if an overload of information isn't in the right format to provide you with an action plan. If all it is numbers, and I mean, it's just, we're all, honestly, we all have information overload between, social media and all of the other electronic, hundreds of, or maybe dozens of emails on a regular basis. It's kind of, separating the wheat from the chaff. And if you can have the tools in place, the newest tools in place to do that, or to do it, find a way to do it yourself. The key is, how do you take, hundreds of thousands of transactions, because that's really what we're talking about, right? I mean, when you take a municipality, we'll take $100 million budget municipality, which is, not even a particularly big county. That's a, small to medium sized county, $100 million budget. I mean, just think of the millions upon millions of ins and out transactions that take place over the course of that year. And then when you think it's over the course of, we'll say, probably 30, 40, 50 bank accounts. We know some counties that have hundreds of separate bank accounts. So, I mean, honestly, no, they're the smartest person in the world can't effectively compile that data and then translate it into usable information without some help. And so you'll need help with tools that either you develop or that NACO and NYSAC endorse that can help you do that. We'll go to the next slide, please, Jeanette. This is the slide that I love the most of some of the ones we do, because this is a 1 year. You're seeing a 1 year cash and liquidity. This is a cash flow and liquidity analysis of a real municipality. It starts on the left side of, I know the dates are small, but it starts on October 1st, and it ends on the right side at September 30th. And you'll see that this municipality has the gray area is, if you will, the waves. The gray area is the operating capital. The average, again, the type is small, but the average is just over $49 million. So this municipality had an average of $49 million in operating funds. As county officials, you already know the general trend. You see it's sort of a downward trend from like November through December through January. They're using existing operating funds because revenues most often did not come in an amount to exceed expenditures. So the operating cash was going down. Then, of course, February, you see February and March, you see the spike. Property tax revenues come in. This chart would look different for a school district than it does for a county, but this one's a county. And then the gray area continues. But just imagine if this whole chart was gray, it was all treated as operating funds. This municipality would say, well, okay, we're doing pretty well. We've got enough funds that we never have to worry about running out of money and not being able to pay our bills. So that's great. But what liquidity analysis does is it adds the bottom layers. Instead of it all being gray operating funds, liquidity analysis can break down the deeper levels, I should say, of that liquidity and determine based upon prior looking at several prior years analysis, because you can't just go by one snapshot. You either have to know it inherently because you've been a county CFO for a long time, so you kind of have a gut feel for it, or you need the data. And of course, the data is much more trustworthy than instincts. But what the analysis of this municipality's prior several years expenditures tell us is there are times, you'll see the green level just underneath the gray, there are times when this municipality might dip into the very lowest level there, dip into what's called the cushion. So if effective liquidity management means maintaining that cushion and having those funds available if need be. And then as we start to go down deeper, we realize that those funds are absolutely, confidently, positively going to remain on deposit for the deeper you go, longer and longer time periods. The farther down into the depths of liquidity you go, the longer the time frame you can count on those funds being there and not being needed. And Kyle, you want to describe the how that translates into the purple boxes at the bottom?
Yeah, and I think, effective liquidity management, right? Determining from the you receive a dollar till the moment you have to expend, how long do you have that dollar for, right? There's the time value that you have to maximize the value of that. And going back to the ocean analogy, as we get further down into that liquidity levels, is the way that we depict this, liquidity level 5 and 4, those are really, sticky money, let's call it, money that's not going to be moving in and out very often, money that can earn significant value if, amongst placed in the right place and actually invested and kind of believing that that's how it's going to be. And so with this chart, we go into, then giving numbers to that. So the liquidity level 5, that's going to be money that is available for the longest time, that those dollars aren't going to need to be expended for 24 to 30 months. Well, certainly there's entities that aren't going to be comfortable going to invest in, say, a CD for 2 years, and that's totally okay. But even the difference, with peer benchmarking and marketplace information of the difference in interest that you can earn from being daily liquid to a 6-month or a 12-month, CD as one example is quite significant. And as Bill referenced earlier, that's the real additional value that can be brought by liquidity data and managing cash from this perspective and taking a look like this. So, we go down and we show the different levels and how long cash is available for, and then, it's up to the entity of having that option to invest and see what opportunities are there. And I think the biggest thing, right, is just having access to the data. And really the data is what is going to help manage cash balances and maximize the value on the cash.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when I was in office and before these kind of tools were available, I made investment decisions on the best data that I had available. And it's going to sound like a dinosaur, but the way I made them was, my chief accountant, I'm not sure if he's listening in, Mark Southworth, terrific chief accountant from the treasurer's office in Schoharie County, but Mark would stick his head in and say, Bill, we got a a $5 million CD. It's a 30-day CD, and it's coming due. And do you want to renew it? And so I was being asked to make an action decision, and I would try to then gather as much data as I could. And my questions were things like, well, Mark, are we going to need that 5 million over the next 30 days? Very often the answer was no. Okay, so we're not going to need it. What are the interest rates? what is the interest rate compared to the interest rate of the expiring 30-day CD, and it was either up a little or down a little, or again, oftentimes the same. And then I would at least consider, should we make it longer instead of 30 days? Should we do 60 days or 90 days? But it's hard to know. It was hard, you're conservative as a chief financial officer. The last thing you want to be is caught short and need that cash and not, have to, cash in a CD early. So, I tried to make decisions based upon the data I had. But the truth is, now with the new tools that are available, you would be asking different questions. Instead of a $5 million CD, maybe the question I should have been asking is, well, should we be looking at a $15 or a $20 million CD? And instead of 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, most of you, I'm sure, ladder CDs. I always used to do that as well. But should I be looking at, $15 million and can some of it be tied up for the full year or even 18 months? And what are the rates that I can get? Not just the rates from my own bank, and I know you have a long relationship with your bank, and it's mutually beneficial, and we never recommend changing banks because what a pain in the neck that is. But there are opportunities while you maintain your existing banking relationship to put money to work in other banks that may be hungry for liquidity, whereas your bank may not be. I mean, every bank is different. Some banks, are embarking on a loan program, on a small business loan program, or a home mortgage program, and so they're gonna need your liquidity, and they're willing to pay for it. Versus there are some times when one bank simply just doesn't, one bank versus another simply just doesn't have a need for liquidity, and so they don't want to pay anything or any high rate. So it all depends on the total of the information, and gathering that information into an understandable format helps you make the best decisions for your municipality.
Yeah, and I think, Bill, you bring up a great point, especially with the ARP funds coming in. There's going to be a lot of banks that are going to be flush with cash and not have an appetite to take on additional deposits, and many of you may have already had some of those conversations. And while we hope that your banker is reaching out to you and giving you updates, we also, from the feedback we've gotten, may not be the case. And so we hope that that can be an open and a facilitated conversation where you're not losing out on value of your cash just because there hasn't been that conversation of maybe it's not the best fit for the bank. They may say, yes, we'll take your deposit, but we're not going to pay you any interest on it, and that's really lost value for the county, and that's we hate to see that. So I think as it's an ever evolving process right now, it's certainly something that should be at the forefront in making sure that you are getting fair value on your money.
Yeah, it's a great point. We'll touch on it more on this next slide. Jeanette, if you would, please. Comparing peer bank benchmarks can make a real difference in earnings, and it can. I know interest rates are lower now than many of us have seen them. Some of the folks that have been around a while, like me, can remember other cycles when we had very low interest rates. But even in a period of low interest rates, it's important to maximize the value of the taxpayer funds that are in your hands. And it's not nickels and dimes. The impact is significant and real. These bank rates, we compared rates for a $1 million 1-year CD among 7 banks. You would recognize, I'm sure, all the names of them. I don't even know what they are, but I know that they're banks that do business with municipalities regularly in New York. And you can see that the highest rate that we found, one bank was offering 68 basis points, which, in the historical sense doesn't sound like much, but 68 basis points versus 5 or 10 basis points is a lot. A $10 million CD at 5 basis points, bank number 7, would generate about $5,000 in interest over the year. A $10 million CD at 68 basis points would generate $68,000. So on that one CD, that's a $63,000 difference. And many counties in the state have more than $100 million in liquidity available. Some of it is being put to work. In other places, it may not be. But if 10 million can earn you an additional 63,000, 100 million can earn you $630,000 over the course of a year, just varying between banks. So, I mean, it's a real number. There are counties that we know of that prior to using liquidity analysis and effective cash management, we're earning, $300,000 or $400,000 a year in interest. Doing it much the same way that I did it, had to do it because the tools didn't exist, during my early years as treasurer. Those same counties now using liquidity data have seen their interest earnings grow to, $1 million, $1.3 million. I mean, one of the great standard bearers, and I'm not sure if he's listening, but Scott German from Genesee County, was recognized with a national award for cash management for doing exactly this, for maximizing the value of the taxpayer funds that he was responsible to take care of. And Scott, of course, is to be acknowledged for his high level of success. But there are many counties, many counties across New York State that are doing the same thing, and they're making a real difference. They're generating hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of untapped revenue over and above U.S. Treasury rates. They're doing that by comparing interest rates. It's not rocket science. It's how much do you have, how long will you have it for, and what are the best rates. The key, the rocket science, if you will, is finding a way to compile all that data to make it actionable items. And Kyle mentioned the ARP money. Every listener on this webinar is about to be dealing with a significantly higher amount of liquidity than they ever had to deal with before. And I know that I'm sure there will be NYSAC, that NYSAC does a great job of keeping county officials informed of the next steps in ARP. And NACO is just, NACO is just an extraordinary resource. If your county isn't a NACO county, I would encourage you to join, to get them to join NACO, because NACO is an extraordinary resource for helping counties do a better job with the tools they have at hand. What NYSAC does on a New York State level, and every one of us on this call is a member of a NYSAC county, because every county in New York State is a member of NYSAC. So NYSAC does just a fantastic job for every county in the state on the state level. But NACO, which not every county is a member of, NACO does the same thing for counties on the national level. And so there's tons of resources out there about the ARP money. what we're talking about though is the strategic management of that money. Not today. We're not talking about the uses of it, although we are in direct communication with U.S. Treasury, and we are through NACO, trying to promote the most flexible options for those ARP funds. But I did some quick math, just like I was talking about the $10 million CD at 68 basis points can generate $68,000. And if you have 100 million, that's a difference of 630,000 over US Treasury rates. The ARP money, if you're a county that's going to get $20 million in ARP money, I did it based upon a $20 million one. I didn't use the highest interest rate, the 68 basis points. I used a lower one. I was averaging around 40 to 45 basis points because we don't know what rates are going to do. But if you're a county that's going to get $20 million total in ARP money over 2 years, first tranche very soon, second tranche a year from now, and I figured that into the calculations. Anyway, that $20 million could generate $926,000 in interest over the course of the life of the ARP funds. As you know, that those funds will be must be expended no later than 12/31/2024. That gives you 44 months from now to be able to strategically deposit and use those funds to generate interest. Your county legislature will over time make plans about how best to spend it, but maximizing the value of it until it's expended can generate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in new additional revenue. And that just gives you more bang for the buck because you can use that 926,000 the same way you use your 20 million. Why leave that money just, sitting on the sidelines? Why not help your community to the tune of 21 million, I'll round off, versus just 20 million. So Kyle, anything to add to that?
No, I think that covers it. I think, at the end of the day, it comes down to access to information and, how can you use the access to that information to capitalize and make the most value out of what you have. So I think that's really at the end of the day what it comes down to.
Great. We're going to go, we'll go to the next slide, Jeanette. We're going to touch on these next couple quickly because I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the investment options. We're planning on ending in about 9 more minutes, ending the webinar portion, but then we'll open it up to questions or welcome any questions from anyone listening, and Kyle and I will do our best to give you the answers. Just quickly, maybe instead of no fee, the better title for this would have been even free banking costs something. Most counties that I know have what they consider to be, no charge or free banking. But of course, nothing is free, and banks, they've got to pay their staff. They got to keep the lights on. They can't provide services literally for free. They have to make money at it some way. So one of the things they do is they either charge a hard fee rate, or they require a compensating balance. But if you look at line 25 there, required balance to pay 0 fees. Bank number 1 requires these are real numbers for a real municipality. Bank number 1 requires a $6 million compensating balance at 0% interest. And if the municipality does that, they'll pay no hard fees. Bank number 2, same municipality, bank number 2, just over 14 million would be the required. And bank number 3 required almost $26 million. So clearly, once you have the data and the information, you have a much better idea of what is the right size banking fee for you. I'll give you a real life story. We were working with one county in the southern tier that the bank was requiring a $12 million compensating balance. And when you looked at the number of transactions being done, and you looked at the transaction fee, and then you compared it to the compensating balance, it just seemed too high. Once it was brought to the bank's attention that the numbers didn't really jive, the bank agreed willingly to drop the compensating balance from requirement from 12 million to $2 million. That freed up $10 million for that municipality to begin earning interest and putting that money to work. So sometimes it's as simple as, once you have all the information in the data, just asking for higher interest on your deposits, or asking for lower compensating balances. And a lot of times that works. One thing I'll just quickly touch on banking as well. When a bank knows that your money is going to remain on deposit, we'll use the $10 million figure. If they know that $10 million is going to be in their bank on deposit for a full year, for 365 days, of course they're going to pay more for that than they will for, let's say, a money market account where the money can be gone tomorrow. I mean, even though the bank might suspect you're going to leave that $10 million in a daily money market account, they really don't know that. CFO could make a decision tomorrow to move those funds. So there's less confidence on behalf of the banker that those funds are going to remain there. When they know those funds are going to be on deposit, they can put that money to work in the community, making a better community, building a stronger economy. And everybody benefits, including the taxpayers. Jeanette, well, I think we can go to the next one because we want to try to make sure we touch on everything. Liquidity is now 10% of the framework when it comes to rating agencies. And Kyle, you want to talk just briefly about that?
Yeah, and new S&P really, taking into account, liquidity management as part of their rating. And we had an example, one county who took the liquidity report that we had put together for them and gave it to the rating agencies, and they were able to take that and it improved the overall bond rating for that entity by providing the information. And whether they had a strong or not strong position, it was just more so that the management, that they were in tune with what was going on and that they were working on improving it, helped the rating agency feel more comfortable, and it, gave them a better rating, which, the benefit from that, as we're all aware of, could be millions of dollars. So just, another small part of the greater access to data and managing it and using it to maximize the value of your funds.
That's right. That was a great dear friend of mine, respected Terry Ross, county treasurer from Allegheny County, and Terry did exactly that. She took liquidity data that she had available, that was compiled into a consolidated form, presented it to S&P, and you're right, she saved $1 million. Jeanette, we can go to our next slide if you would, please. And we're just gonna summarize the benefits of liquidity management, and then we're gonna go to the last slide very quickly. Liquidity management is knowing how much and how much cash you have and how long that cash will be available. It's assurance that your bank fee structure is equitable and that you're not overpaying for bank fees. Liquidity provides your municipality with a strengthened credit rating and confirmation that you have sufficient liquidity to satisfy expenditures. It's a great feeling, just having that confirmation, independent third-party confirmation that you have sufficient liquidity to deal with any issue that comes along. Kyle, you want to touch base on the bullet points on the right?
Yep, and so in addition, peer benchmarking to ensure your cash is performing at the highest possible level. Having the information of what your peers are paying or receiving in value that are similar size and stature. Also, liquidity stress testing, show how vulnerable cash positions are, and that was that one chart that we showed with the cash flow at the top. In the deeper parts of the ocean where you have access to some additional value down there that you may not be aware of. And then again, the confidence that you're maximizing all financial resources on objective third-party data. So using all of the information, all of the tools provided by NYSAC and NACO and in the marketplace, just to make sure that you are getting as much possible value out of every dollar that you have to benefit the county and the taxpayers.
Excellent, great point. And we'll go to the final slide, if we could, please, Jeanette. And we're going to touch on these quickly because they're not in place yet, but Dave Lucas and his team at NYSAC have done a fantastic job of advocating for an expansion of investment options in New York State. Steve Aquario had asked me and our Kyle's and our colleagues to help come up with some expanded options. And many months ago, in fact, in 2020, and Steve Aquario, Mark Levine, Dave Lucas have all been trying to make sure that advocacy reached the state's ears, the governor and the comptroller. And I want to thank the NYSAC membership for actually adopting a resolution in this year's packet of resolutions about this. So let's touch on these 5 bullet points. One of the options we're hoping that the state agrees to is general obligation bonds and notes of any state other than New York. Right now, you're limited to obligations of the state of New York, but bonds being issued by the other 50 states can offer sometimes offer advantageous interest rates over New York State bonds. Again, very safe, very secure, and we're talking about high rated obligations of states. We had hoped for obligations of other municipalities because I love the kind of the symmetry of, the county of Schoharie needs to borrow money for a building project, and the county of Delaware has $30 million in deep liquidity that they would like to put to work. There's a great symmetry there of Schoharie County could save money by buying those bonds over other investments, and Delaware County could make a higher rate of return. But for right now, it's limited to these 5 bullets are basically taking New York City's investment options and expanding them across New York State. So that's why NYSAC and we are promoting these options, because these are options that New York City already has. So New York City is a compilation of 5 counties. Why shouldn't the other counties in New York State basically have the same right? Second bullet is corporate bonds, high-grade corporate bonds. Again, they would have to be highly rated, and there would probably be limitations on how much you could put in any one of these to make sure that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Bankers acceptances is the third bullet. Those are sort of like CDs. I got educated a little bit about what these are. I wasn't familiar with them, but bankers acceptances are they're sort of like CDs. They're promissory notes where they originally started where a bank would say, okay, if you deposit $10 million in our bank for 6 months, we will pay you X interest rate. It was really more of a promissory thing rather than an official CD, and there was often no penalty for early withdrawal. It's just one more tool. It's just one more tool in the toolbox that may or may not be helpful at any given time. There may be other times in the economic and cash flow cycle where a banker's acceptance is something that you say, oh, well, we can get 1% versus 50 basis points, so we want to do that. Fourth bullet is obligations or instruments of any agency of United States government, all federal agencies. That's a great option. Those are, that's going to provide with great flexibility, especially for those long-term obligations, long-term investments the deeper you go in your liquidity, the longer you can tie up that money. And no load money market mutual funds, where payment is guaranteed by the United States government. So those are what we're hoping for. Dave Lucas, a great advocate on behalf of counties, it tells me that there is some chance that even though it was not those options were not included in the budget adoption process, they may be adopted as standalone legislation, and certainly NYSAC and our team will do everything we can to help promote that. So thank you. That takes us into the Q&A section, and Jeanette, I'll turn it over to you and Dave Lucas, and Kyle and I are at your disposal.
Great, thanks, Bill. I also wanted to thank OSC again and Dan Aquilino for helping out with this and monitoring the CPE part of the program, and also lining up the OSC speakers that are coming in the future. So I do have a couple questions here. I'll just read as they came in. Liquidity levels account for all funds. How do you consolidate multiple bank accounts for investment purposes?
I'll take the first shot at that, Kyle. Sometimes there are bank accounts that can be consolidated, because the more accounts you have, the more fees that are probably being either hard or soft charged. So there are times when accounts can be consolidated, and it's a matter of identifying those, and then the CFO making that decision to consolidate them. You're still going to need segregation of funds, and you're still going to need separate bank accounts. The key, Dave, is more how do you keep track of them and consolidate where possible. Kyle, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just mainly making it a function of the accounting side as opposed to the banking side. So keeping track of the isolation of those funds when possible. Certainly understand it's not always possible, but more so on your bookkeeping side. And that's going to help bring additional value on the banking side. As Bill mentioned, less accounts, maybe certain accounts could charge different fees for the same types of activities, whether it be wires or ACHs or things like that. So putting all of that activity into the accounts that can charge the lower of those fees could certainly end up being beneficial, and also, a much more concise and consolidated picture from the banking side.
All right. Can you guys include a short discussion on best practices for incorporating minimum bank balance requirements for maintenance of banking relationships, and maybe some negotiating aspects to consider when discussing those balances with the bank?
Yeah, sure. The negotiating aspect is important. Unfortunately, it's so that it's not just a request, me knocking on the bank's door as a CFO and saying, gee, you're requiring a compensating balance of, we'll use that real life example, $12 million. Would you be a nice person and drop it to, something less? The more data you have, the more information you have, it provides you with, information is power. So in that municipality's case, what they did was they had the peer banking benchmarks that are provided as a part of, true liquidity analysis. And they were able to go and say, listen, the math just doesn't add up. Our compensating balance, you charge X amount per transaction, even though it's not a hard fee, X amount per deposit, when it all, so much per month, when it all comes down to it, even at these low interest rates, it looks to us like our compensating balance should only be $2 million or whatever the number is versus $12 million. And when presented with, with data like that, in our experience, the bankers try to be understand that they're this is taxpayer money we're talking about, and so it's really having, it's like having the aces in the hole where you know what you should be paying, and the only way to do that is to compile the data and do the comparison.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, so we're not financial advisors, we're not an RIA, we don't accept any deposits. We truly would feel that would be a conflict of interest. So with the information that we provide, just keep that lens on. We never advise anybody to change their banks or anything like that. But I think where that conversation, where you can really get some leverage is having, as Bill mentioned, peer marketplace information and knowing what others are paying for similar services. But the other thing is we understand that the bank needs to make a little bit of money as well. We just want to make sure it's only a little bit. So, having, knowing what fair market is, I think is really just the most important part, and making sure that your banking relationship is equitable for both sides.
Good point, Kyle.
Thank you, guys. That's all the submitted questions we have. I had one that was kind of interesting when you said the addition of ARP funds coming into the scene, and some banks unwilling or not willing to pay a reasonable rate of return, even as small as it is, potentially. The counties themselves, the 57 counties, will be receiving about $1 billion in the first tranche, a little over $1 billion, which, as you pointed out, Bill, they have 4 years to spend. It's not like this money is going to get spent right away. And you throw in New York City and the state, just $10 billion the first year, potentially, of liquid resources coming in that probably won't get spent right away, in addition to all the reserves that are out there. Any additional comment on, what to do if the bank is unwilling or is really lowballing you?
Yeah, well, that it's a distinct possibility. I can remember in you mentioned in the intro, Dave, prior to the Great Recession, interest rates were higher, and then after the Great Recession, interest rates went down. I remember being in office and trying to compare interest rates, doing due diligence of the funds that Schoharie County had to invest, whether it was for 30 days or for longer, and contacting local banks and just being told, listen, we're not going to give you a quote because, to be perfectly frank, we can't take your money. We don't want your money. There's nothing we can do. So then you would expand your horizon, and you'd look at other banks. And that's kind of what it comes down to, is how do you best compare banks against each other and against the overall marketplace to make sure that A, you're finding a place to safely secure those funds, and B, to earn the highest reasonable interest on those funds. And it's work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of legwork, and it's rewarding. Municipality, when it's done right and done consistently, can generate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional revenue, oftentimes. But you can't just do it once. That's the greatest thing about the new financial technology tools that are now in place is it's got to be an ongoing, continuous. It's not a one-shot thing where oh, I compared interest rates and I made my investment choices for this month, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. Some of those investments are going to mature and come due next month or the month after that. It's an ongoing process, and most counties honestly have needed help to do that, and we're happy to do that on behalf of 3+1. Of course, we're happy to work with counties to do that. But our partnership with NYSAC and NACO is key, and we try to help in any way we can, whether it's through information or through data collection.
Thanks. Kyle, any additional comments?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is that, there's, as Bill said, it's not to say there's not opportunity out there, but it's going to take a little bit more work, and in some cases a lot of work, to find that opportunity. And I think that's just, one thing to remember is that there is opportunity in the marketplace, but it could take a lot of knocking on doors and really to get the full value out of that, making sure that you don't leave any stone unturned.
Well,
Dave,
yes, go ahead.
That's just what I was going to say. I just want to thank you, Dave, you and Steve Aquario and Jeanette, Mark Levine, your whole team there at NYSAC. Thank you for putting together this year's finance school in conjunction with the comptroller's office. Even though we're all remote, I would love to be right there face to face. I'm sure many of my friends and former colleagues are on this call right now, and I miss everybody, and I look forward to the day when we can all do it together in person. But thank God for NYSAC and their outreach and commitment to finance school. I really appreciate you doing this year.
Thank you very much. So Jeanette, I see we're coming up on the end of the webinar time. Any closing comments or housekeeping we need to handle?
Nothing on my end, Mark. Just reminding that if they need the OSC form to get their credits for this session, please remember to either download it from the handout tab on your screen or go to the NYSAC website under Education and Finance School, and you'll find it listed just under the recording and the PowerPoint PDF.
Great. Yeah, and as a reminder, that those will be posted this afternoon, correct? The webinar.
That's correct.
All right, great. Well, thank you those that attended today, and we will look forward to meeting again during the week as we continue the 55th County Finance School with our partner OSC and the New York State Association of County Treasurers and Finance Officers. Thank you.